I think he's in his 50-year high school reunion. Is that right?
Yeah,
In 2 weeks. So he's a class of 74. If you think about it, the class of 74 and 75 at Norman High produced 3 Hall of Fame broadcasters. Dick Pryor, Bob Berry, and Dean Blevins, all 3 in that same area. So, but Dick went on to get a law degree too. So, in keeping with our state's biblical theme, I looked at Matthew 23, where he talked about the scribes and the Pharisees. So, Dick, you come on up and go with that. So, thank you.
thanks, Andy. That's a very unique introduction. I've never had that one before, so good for you. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here and to see so many friends in this crowd. So many friends. It's always great to be here at this club. When I was in high school at Norman High, I was a Rotary Student of the Month. One month, it was April. And it was from this club. So I've always been fond of this club. I'm a member of the Norman Sooner Rotary Club, the morning club, and have been for about 30 years now. But Rotary has always been near and dear to me. I'm going to go through this pretty fast because here's what I want to do. I was asked to speak about the state of journalism. That's like being asked to speak about politics in 30 minutes or less, right? So I'm going to talk for a little while, but then I want to do something that we've been doing a lot lately, and I think it's good practice, and that is to talk to members of the community about what their concerns are and what questions they may have about journalism. Because we don't have all the answers. We don't have some kind of early morning meeting or email or fax that tells us what to do every day. We rely on people in the community to tell us what's going on, to tell us if we're doing a good job, to tell us if we need to get better, and to point us in the right direction. So, I'm going to try to go through my presentation as quickly as I can. Feel free to stop me if you want to. But you know, I'm a broadcaster, so I can condense or expand as needed. And so I'll go through a little bit of this. I want to tell you about KGOU. I want to tell you a little bit about journalism's environment in the state of Oklahoma, and then I want to turn it around. So I'm going to watch my time fairly carefully so I can get you out on time. Now, I know some of you in this crowd already know a lot of this stuff. Yes, you already know. Looking back at the transcript delegation, I'm looking at Dean Joe Foote. Hi, Joe. So some of you already know about this stuff, but other people don't. And one of the things that we do face in journalism is a lot of people don't really understand what we do, or why we do it, or how we do it. And I think that has led over a period of time, and it's been accelerating in the last few years, an erosion of trust in journalism. Journalism is essential to a functioning democracy. We have to have reliable, trusted journalism. If we don't, where are we? If you can't trust the stories that you see, if you can't trust the people that you watch on television or that you hear on the radio or that write in the newspaper, where are we? Where are we? So it's important for us to be as trustworthy as we can and to do everything that we can to earn your trust. That's our responsibility. You're going to have a responsibility too, but I'll tell you about that a little bit later. So, I'm going to see if I can make this work right. And it just went to Hitachi. So, I can tap dance here for just a second. Okay, there we go. I'm assuming the forward arrow will take us forward. And did it? Yes, okay. So I'm the general manager at KGOU Radio, which is your NPR source. We are your local NPR station. We cover the Oklahoma City Metro and 36 counties throughout the state of Oklahoma through our broadcast services. We are a public service media organization, non-commercial, non-profit. We're operated out of the University of Oklahoma. The University of Oklahoma owns the license, and we're a department of the University of Oklahoma Outreach. It says at the bottom that we are listener-supported. That is really true. Most of our funding comes from business sponsorships and from individual donations. So when we ask people to donate, we really mean it because that's critical for us in terms of being able to provide the service that you expect. All right, our format is news, talk, music, On the weekends, primarily, we have Tonic the Funky Groove Show, which is a funny name in a way, but it's an instrumental program that is really upbeat. It's funk and groove and soul and hip hop and things that you might not imagine being instrumental. It's a very popular show. We've had people actually ask about this show for a national syndication. So we do that. We do the Weekend Blues with Hard Luck Jim. That's been around for more than 30 years on the weekends. And then Global Sojourn on Saturday nights, which is an international music show. It's hosted by Chad Mitchell, who is an architect here. And Chad has been doing this for, oh my gosh, about almost 40 years. So that's just some of what we do. Our mission is to deliver thoughtful storytelling show that informs, reflects, connects, and serves communities. Where can you find us? Well, on the radio in Norman, 106.3 FM. In the Oklahoma City area, 105.7 FM. And then we have various transmitters and translators around the state of Oklahoma. You can see us online, KGOU.org. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as you can see, NPR One, Spotify, Apple Music. We have podcasts as well, and on smart speakers. Where can you hear us on the radio? Well, here are the various locations. Now, you see in Norman right there in the very middle, when I started at KGOU in, well, it was a different century. When I started at KGOU in 1974 as a student, we could be heard in parts of Norman. And now you can hear us in all of those places, and if you actually look at the map, we take in more than 1.8 million people, and we reach into the Texas Panhandle and into southwest Kansas. So we have a very large footprint now. We are an NPR source. Year after year after year, NPR is among the most trusted news organizations in America. Another one that we also air that is very trusted and one of the most loved and trusted brands is BBC News. The BBC airs on KGOU in the afternoon and overnights. Now, I mentioned trust. Well, we consider ourselves to be professional journalists, and that brings a special obligation. So it requires a commitment to reporting based on facts, those pesky facts, objective reality, not what you want it to be or not what you've heard it might be, but objective reality, accuracy, fairness, the courage to do the reporting, and high ethical standards. What is the role of the news media? Why does it matter? Why should you care about us? Well, because we seek truth. We act as a surrogate for the people. We get to go places, we get to talk to people, we get to cover stories that you don't have time to do, and you don't have access. We do. But it brings with it a special obligation to do it right. We promote government transparency, we hold elected officials and powerful institutions accountable on behalf of the people they serve. We provide information that fuels the marketplace of ideas. When you're sitting around the table talking about stuff, it's the marketplace of ideas. It's where great ideas and issues are discussed. We promote greater understanding. And that's not just understanding about the news, but understanding about each other. And above all, we serve the public. That's why we exist. So what do real journalists do? What do real journalists do? Well, we gather facts, all that stuff. We determine veracity and credibility. Is it true? Is it credible? Is it reliable? Should you believe it? We sort it all out. There's so much stuff up there. You probably noticed. Social media has a lot of it. Stuff. We sort it all out and determine what can you believe and what maybe should you not believe. We sometimes get criticized for that, but somebody's got to do it, and that's our job. We connect the dots. This leads to this, leads to this. That's pretty helpful information. We provide context in our reporting, and we try, bottom line, to communicate meaning to our listeners, our readers, our viewers. And as I have told our news people for years, real journalists, we are reporters. We're not stenographers. We just don't write stuff down and say, here's a bunch of stuff, good luck. we put it all together in a story form so you can make some sense of it. Now, not a surprise, there are various pressures. I'll do this very fast. This is just a partial list of the pressures that we face in journalism. Fragmentation of the audience, competition, declining audience size. There's more places for people to get news and information out than ever before. So we're all competing against each other for a certain share of the audience. People want news on demand. That creates deadline pressures, continuous news cycles. We don't have as much time as we used to thoroughly research stories as much as the public would like for us to be able to do. Why? Because the public also wants it fast. Does that lead to some mistakes? Of course it does. It inevitably does, but we have to fight that. We have to report on various platforms. For some of us growing up, there were 3 network stations and PBS a little bit later. You had your local radio stations. You listened to Coleman, WKY in Oklahoma City, and KNOR in Norman, wherever you may be, WBBZ in Marlsville. But the fact of the matter was you had a limited number of options. You did have more newspapers. But now we're expected to provide news and information on various platforms. Financial sustainability is always an issue. We have limited staffing and production capacity. We hear from people that say, well, why don't you do more stories on, and a good response is, that would be great if we had about 15 more people. We don't. So we have to make some tough editorial decisions, which may or may not be what the public wants. That's why we need to hear from you. There is a conflict that sometimes arises, especially in TV, about the brand. Is it best to be first? You probably heard that. We're first with the news, first with whatever. Okay, great, glad you're first. Are you right? It's a question. So there's always a conflict there as well. Those are just a few of the things that we have to face in our decision making. I'm also asked, what is news? What is news? Well, here's an answer. The flat tire is news. If you have a flat tire, you don't go home at night and say, hey, guess what? I have 3 wonderful tires. No, you don't. You say, I have a flat tire today. That's the news. Now, you may recognize some of these organizations. Are these news organizations? Do they provide news? Do they provide opinion? Do they provide advocacy? Do they do all of it? Well, I think you can make an argument that for most of them, they provide all of it. One of the problems that we face as journalists is that people, consumers, folks in the public, can't tell the difference. Some of us in this room are old enough to remember when the guy on TV would say, well, I'm going to make a commentary, usually GM, could have been the news director, but usually the GM, providing a commentary about something. And at the bottom of the screen, it had a word, and it was commentary. And you knew that whatever he was saying, or she, was commentary, not news. Now it's all blurred, and people don't really know the difference. News talk arose 35 years ago after the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine that said you didn't have to say anything nice about somebody after you had attacked them or give them a chance to respond, which led to a right versus left, us versus them construct in talk media, which promotes tribalism, extremism, partisanship, identity politics. Because why? Because it's right versus left. Are we as human beings, are we as Americans that simple? We're just right or left? No, there's all kinds of shades in between. But this construct has promoted that kind of political partisanship. I raise that issue because it's something we as journalists have to deal with our audiences. Why is that important? I would say that this may be one of the most important things that has happened in journalism in the last, 25 years. And that is the rise of confirmation bias. Anybody know what it is besides this? Well, here's the example. It's information that confirms personal beliefs and reinforces personal points of view. People tend to gravitate toward that. Do you listen to radio programs that are diametrically opposed to what you think? Probably not. So those that are in that insulated news bubble often consider stories that do not lead to their desired conclusions. Whatever they want that conclusion to be, they figure, well, if you're not telling me what I want to hear, you're biased. And you are untrustworthy. That's affected those of us in journalism, because now we have to prove that we're trustworthy and that we're mostly not biased. I would argue that we are probably the only, or at least one of the few, professions in the world, Joe, if I'm wrong, correct me, that is actually trained not to be biased. Yet, we are constantly accused of being biased. By people, why? Because they would rather hear us forward their own bias. It's a struggle that we have in journalism. All right, so recently I went on a 4-city tour with Ted Struley from Oklahoma Watch. We called it the Trust Me, I'm a Journalist, that's kind of a joke. Community engagement tour. We went to 4 cities and we talked to people, just like we're doing here today. We did a little dog and pony show, and then we asked people to talk to us about what they want to know. What concerns you? Do you like us? Do you trust us? Do you love us? Do you hate us? Tell us why. So we did that in 4 locations. It was sponsored by the Oklahoma Media Center, which is funded in part by the Inasmuch Foundation. Thank you very much to the Inasmuch Foundation for support for journalism in the state of Oklahoma and beyond. Some of the stuff that we heard, and I've rolled in a little additional research that we've seen over the last few years, including some research that was done last year for the Oklahoma Media Center, Oklahoma Journalism Environment Research, done by Pat McFerrin, and some information that I recently heard at the NPR conference in Washington, D.C. about a month ago, plus what we've heard from people in communities. And here's a short synopsis. People want more reporting on local communities where they live. Yeah. They want to see more of what the Norman Transcript provides. Trust local reporters and organizations more than national. This is striking. This is striking. Research shows that Oklahomans trust national news organizations to the extent of 33%. If you're an Oklahoma news organization, they trust 56% of the people trust you. If you are a local organization, such as KGOU or the Norman Transcript or whoever it may be that you follow, the ref, 62% of the people trust you. So the closer you get to home, the more likely it is that your audience is going to trust you. They do not see, in general, newsrooms as unbiased. In fact, NPR did some focus groups, which were enlightening, where they asked groups of people from around the country, so which news organizations do you consider to be unbiased? And they broke out laughing. I watched this. They broke out laughing. They said they're all biased, which is probably true to some extent. People suffer from news fatigue. How many of you are just kind of tired of the news? Anybody? Yeah, hands, right? That is reflected in the support that we receive as journalists. It is reflected in the audience, which is declining and fracturing. Because a lot of people, and I don't blame them, I think I'm probably one of them, because I've done this a long time, pretty close to the news, get worn out by some of this stuff. They want to see and hear fewer political stories. They want to see and hear more good news stories. I challenge people, tell me what a good news story is.
Free tires.
Free tires. It's the 3 good tires. We'll get to that. Thank you, David. Okay, so, good stories. Good stories. That's pretty relative. They want to see and hear more fact-based stories, fair enough. But here is the really sobering one for us. 82% of Oklahomans in this survey Pat McFerrin did, 82% of Oklahomans do not want to pay for news. They want it for free. They want it for free. We get about 10% of our funding from the University of Oklahoma. We have to raise the other 80%. So if people don't want to pay for it, if people don't want to subscribe to the transcript, if they don't want to contribute to their local station or go to those sponsors and trade with those sponsors, what's going to happen? All right. So on that thought-provoking message, I'm going to turn it around to you. What do you want to know about us? What do you want to know about the meeting? What do you think of us? You've got a microphone out there. Anybody that wants to speak? Randy, I'll hand it to you, and you're going to have to give it back to me.
Okay. This isn't a question, but it's a comment that I thought was pretty sad. This was, gosh, years and years ago. There was a guy that had a comedy show, Jon Stewart. I used to love that show. It was very opposite of my views, leaning, but it was funny. But I saw a report that where people get their news, the most trusted news, he was number one. The networks, Fox, CNN, ABC, whatever, they were way down the list. The others in between, I'd never even heard of before. So it kind of goes back to who you trust, what you're talking about. I don't know how we get people to watch real news instead of comedy shows for their opinions.
We don't know either. Yeah, it is a little scary. And he admitted it. I remember when that came out, and Jon Stewart said, "People trust me? I'm a comedian. This is a comedy show." I think some of what he said did ring true and resonated with people, and some of it didn't. But that's the nature of it. Yes?
Yeah, I was
Mark.
just curious with the shift in how the mode of delivery for news has dramatically changed, really, especially within the last 15 years, where what used to be things where we would hear commentary through KGOU or whatever is now being delivered by someone who may or may not be reputable, who set up their own set and studio in their mom's basement. And so I was just wondering how do you guys try to differentiate yourself in how you deliver the news and the way that you communicate it? Because that's where, I mean, if you follow Twitter, whatever, it's got the algorithms that starts to pull what your beliefs are, and you're fed that all the time. And a lot of times it's just some guy who's actually has a job on the side, he has a full-time job, and now this is his on the side thing, and now he's being looked at as a trusted pundit, and you don't know anything about his background, but he did set up a laptop and started to do a podcast. So how do you guys differentiate yourselves in a way so that what you deliver really looks and feels different and more authentic than the personal bias that is overwhelmingly driving the content of those kinds of methods?
Thank you for that question. That tees up another program that I do, but I will try to give you a short answer, which is this is part of it. Talking to people saying, we're not operating out of somebody's basement, right, on the internet. We have no accountability, we have no ethics. We subscribe to codes of ethics from NPR, from public broadcasting, Society of Professional Journalists, Radio Television News Directors Association. We subscribe to all of those ethics codes. We have standards. That's why when I say professional journalists, real journalists, we have to differentiate ourselves somehow. And it's difficult because so many people do want to hear what that guy is saying, right? Even if that guy has no idea what he's talking about. But people will gravitate toward it, and they may not know the difference, and they may not care because they like to hear it. It is a real struggle. So I think the more we can communicate with people in our audience, with our community members, with our friends, so you know us more, and you know we're serious about this, that's one of the ways I think we have to approach it. And I think in journalism, we have not done a good enough job communicating with our audience to let them know who we are, what we do, how we do it, why we're important, so they can trust us over those other people. That's a short response. Yes?
I want to pay you a compliment. I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have ABC in Oklahoma Oklahoma City, so that dates me. My compliment is, you never made yourself about the story.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I've watched you on TV, and what we're seeing now is pretty girls, handsome men, who probably have no journalistic credential, and they've made themselves the story in an entertainment venue. And so my question to you is, was that change driven by management, advertising? What would cause this dramatic shift, which has made us lose confidence in our news sources?
First, thank you for that compliment. It's one of the best ones I've ever heard. Thank you. It drives me crazy when I see interviewers who ramble on and on and on just to show how much they know, rather than just asking simple, direct questions and letting the person who knows what they're talking about answer a specific question. It's not about us, it's about the people that we're talking to. And so, if you ever do venture into that, look at me, I know so much and I keep going on and on and on, asking you some kind of question where essentially all the person being interviewed can say is yes or no. That's not real journalism. So thank you for that. As far as what we can do, why this has happened, I would say it is in many respects a management decision, and I can speak a lot more about television probably, certainly the newspaper, but it's a management decision driven by consultants. And I'm going to look around the room and say, if you don't like it, look in the mirror. Because consultants have done research for years and years and years trying to figure out how we can appeal to the audience. And that promotes a lot of what you see, which is what you're talking about, and which I think a lot of us probably don't care for very much, is that cosmetic part of journalism. You know, I remember Andy, one other Journalism Hall of Famer, by the way, from Norman. I was in her homeroom at Norman High School, Terry Watkins. She was a year ahead of me. But I remember talking to Terry Watkins at Channel 5 one time, and she had just broken a big story. I think it was on the county commissioner scandal in Oklahoma back in the 80s. Came back to her desk, and her phone was ringing. She thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to answer this caller, and like what I wrote, or whatever, what I said. And then she really her head kind of sort of exploded when she said, you know what they called about? They said I had a flyaway hair. So consultants have driven a lot of that. And this goes to the good news aspect. A lot of people say, we want to see more good news stories. Do stories about, you know, the valedictorian, or do stories about the high school band, or the cheerleaders, or, you know, good works that people are doing in the community. But guess what? The research shows people say that, they do not watch it. Because they are conditioned to know that news is the flat tire. And so over time, people kind of tune that out and they want to know who got shot last night. And so that's part of the reason for that. I could go on and on, but again, thank you. Yes, David?
I noticed you, on one of your screens, you listed that in your station can be found on some of the social media platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Does that polarize your brand by doing that? Because to me, that's the biggest source of the problem. People are not watching you or listening to you, they're getting their news off social media.
That's a really good question. I think I can answer that in two parts. Number one is because of the fragmentation, we have to get our audience wherever we can. So to the extent that we can appear on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or wherever it may be, on Spotify, we are aggregating our audience because the broadcast audience is eroding. Consumers don't listen to the radio, they don't watch TV, they don't subscribe to newspapers like they used to. 82% in Oklahoma want it all for free. 66%, the same research, 66% of the people in Oklahoma get their news from where? Television. Television. What's second? Anybody want to guess? What's second? Social media, led by Facebook. So we have to have a presence there to try to capture those people that are getting their news from other places. Can that be a problem? Yes. Do I like it? No. But we have to do that to reach our audience, because we have to reach our audience where the audience is. Time for maybe for one or two more questions. Yes?
I'm biased because I'm a not-for-profit director, but would it be possible, or maybe they're already doing it, I just don't know, to do a spotlight on the different not-for-profits in the community? Because we have a lot that are doing great work and helping people and, reducing the suicide rate, those kinds of things.
Who's going to do it? Which members of my staff do I pull off of other stuff to do those stories? I agree with you. We've talked about this. We actually have. Could we highlight the good work going on in communities? Would people appreciate that? Sure. But we cover 36 counties, including the Oklahoma City Metro. Where does it end? Who do we focus on? We're located in Norman, but we cover the Oklahoma City Metro, and Oklahoma City is now the 20th largest city in the U.S. But we also cover Anadarko, and Sealing, and Ada. And what are we going to do? Great point. If we had that capacity, if we had the staff, I would love to do more of that. But it's limited. One other quick thing. Thank you for that question. It's a serious and good question. We receive about $530,000 a year from donations from individuals, about $400,000 a year from underwriters, which is business sponsorships, and about $200,000 from State Impact Oklahoma. So a total of about $600,000 a year from business sponsors, about $500,000 or so from individual donations. Our audience, our weekly audience, is between 50 and 90,000 people. What's the percentage of people, those 50 to 90,000, that averages around 70? What's the percentage, do you think, of the people that are listening, that group of people that listen every week, that donate 1 penny? 10%? 5%? Yes? Any other guesses? Andy says 2%. Andy's going to win just because he didn't go over. Okay? 3%. And that's consistent across the United States. 3 or 4% of the people will contribute. So we bring in roughly $1 million a year through donations. We're always asking for donations, and we know that there are certain wonderful, loyal people that contribute to us, and we appreciate them very, very much. But if everybody that listened, the 70,000 per week that listened to us, would contribute $1 a week, $1 a week, you probably tip somebody $1 a week for something, right? $1 a week, we would have $3.6 million a year to operate with, and then we can do those stories. That's a challenge. One more quick question, maybe 30-second question. Judy?
What's happening in journalism schools to help? What's happening in journalism schools you see or changes?
Oh my gosh, that's a long question. I don't have time to answer that question. I would say, get with Joe afterwards and, I wish I had a good answer, but I know I need to wrap it up because you need to get out of here. I want to leave you with this challenge. Besides contribute, besides support your local news organization, we're working for you. Here's what else I want to ask you. Consume news from a variety of sources. Seek the truth yourself. Fact check. Use reliable sources. Check it out. Do a little bit of work. Ask questions. Think critically. Does this make sense? Really? Don't be gullible. So many people will look at something on social media and say, oh, I have to share that. But what they didn't know is that that was generated by a group. It's called the Internet Research Group in St. Petersburg, Russia. And it's intended to divide us gullible Americans. So think about it. Evaluate fairness and trustworthiness over time. Don't give me a call because you didn't hear both sides in a 3-minute story. We might have reached out to the other side, if there's just one other side, and they refuse to talk to us. What do you do about that? We still have to fill our time, but it might be in the next hour when you will hear that person or somebody else. Evaluate us over time. Have civil conversations about important topics. Share meaningful stories. Support trustworthy journalism. Thank you very much, and now back to Liz.
One more hand for Dick. The bus buckets are still over there, so if you didn't get a chance, if it didn't make its way to you, please feel free to donate. And we want to say thank you for being here. If you're a guest, if you're here every week, if you're here every once in a while, we're happy to see you. So thank you for being here, and bring us out. You gonna bring us out, Jamie?
You got it.